Smart meters. I've been getting a lot of articles about these coming up in my newsfeed recently. I've read a couple of them and I'll link a few of them in the description below in case anybody is interested in reading them. Some of them are worth it for the comment section alone. These articles focus on the recent drive to convince utility company customers to have their regular meters switched over to smart ones. Smart ones, the utility companies tell us, will revolutionise the way we use gas and electricity. And it must be true because they've got a couple of cartoon characters to back up their claims. But some people, the articles go on to say, have refused to have smart meters. They don't all object for the same reasons, of course. Some don't see the need for them. Some are worried about getting locked into a service with a particular utility company. Some think they'll emit harmful radiation. Some think they'll start talking to their fridge and report back the percentage of junk food inside to the government. But for a variety of reasons, some people don't want smart meters fitted and report feeling bullied and harassed into agreeing to switch. Some people are apparently even locking their meters up to prevent people from trying to switch them over by stealth while they're out. Some people are patrolling the perimeter fence with angry dogs and shotguns growling, "Get off my land." Okay, I might be making that last part up, but the point is, some people say they don't want them and are feeling under pressure to accept them anyway, to the point that some companies are trying to persuade people by insisting that it is a legal obligation for all households to have a smart meter fitted, even though it's only an obligation for the company to offer them, not that the household must accept the offer. So why are people so reluctant? Is it because people don't like change? Is it because they don't trust the utility companies? Is it because they don't want to save money on their gas and electricity supplies? Because let's face it, who needs extra money in their pocket when they could happily hand it over to some greedy corporate fat cat instead? Shall I book the skiing holiday, darling? No, I'd rather give all our money to Eon instead. And the utility companies keep telling us it's also we can save money, so it must be true, right? What money-grabbing company wouldn't want to convince us all that they want to save us money we could be giving to them instead? So let's look at the objections, and please bear in mind these are only some of the objections that I've heard people saying or read about in news articles, so there may be many more that I haven't included. If anybody watching can think of an objection or even a pro-argument for smart meters, please feel free to mention it in the comments below. 1. We'll be locked into a service with one supplier. This is apparently a problem with some of the earlier Mark I versions. They don't remain smart if you switch to another supplier, but then you'll just end up with what you already had. Even if you don't have a smart meter, if you change supplier, you may end up tied into a contract anyway, depending on the supplier. 2. People will be able to get my bank details and or other sensitive information from the smart meter. The utility companies tell us they don't store such information on smart meters, and much as I am reluctant to go against my usual policy, I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one. That doesn't, however, mean that they won't continue to compromise your personal information in the other ways that they were already doing. 3. The utility companies will know when we go out and come round and burgle us. Again, much as it pains me to defend a utility company, I feel the need to point out here that they don't need to break into your house to rob you. They'll just send you an estimated bill, where they estimate the usage for your entire postcode and cheerfully demand that you pay for it. 4. The smart meter will hack into my Wi-Fi and switch off my fridge. Probably not, unless you have a Wi-Fi enabled fridge. My fridge is 20 years old, it's barely considered electrical. But even so, the smart meters don't run through your Wi-Fi. They have their own communication built in, so it won't run off your network even if your fridge does. Then again, in the future, who knows? Maybe they will be able to identify which plug socket your fridge is running from and remotely shut that down to save money, or just for a laugh. 5. The radiation will turn me into a cyborg. When I read this to my son, he said, "But that's fantastic. Who wouldn't want to be a cyborg? You could punch your enemies through a wall." Sadly, for those who would consider this one of the pro-arguments, I don't think it's going to happen. 6. The smart meter will know when I download something dodgy and report back to the government. Firstly, the government already knows all your dirty little secrets. Secondly, stop downloading that dodgy stuff. Thirdly, as I mentioned in point 4, the smart meter will be using its own communication device and won't run through your Wi-Fi, so even if the black helicopters do start circling, they probably weren't sent by British Gas. 7. The utility companies will start rationing supplies and or increase the cost at peak times. Now this is a concept I could probably get on board with. I don't know if they do this yet, although I have heard that there are certain tariffs that charge different rates at different times of the day, and I hate tariffs full stop. Tariffs are ridiculous. Hundreds of different prices for different customers. I mean, different prices depending on supplier, that I understand. But depending on tariff, if I go to the co-op to buy a pint of milk, there's one price and that's what everybody pays. You don't have 20 different prices listed depending on your level of membership. It costs what it costs and that's it. But I'm digressing. The point is that apparently this concept does already exist, even though I've never been billed this way myself. I've heard of people programming the washing machine to operate at 2 a.m. because the electricity is cheaper then, so maybe this one is true. 8. The utility companies will be able to disconnect us on a whim. This is another one that I could believe, and this one would be a big disincentive to me personally. Having experienced terrible service from utility companies ever since I've had the misfortune of being the one to pay for it. Currently, if you dispute an amount that your utility company says you owe, you can work out the bill correctly and pay them for actual usage. And if they refuse to accept it, they have to apply to the courts for permission to break in and disconnect you. They can't just flick a switch and out go the lights. Unlike other service providers like your phone, internet, Netflix, etc., they can switch you off if you don't pay, and you have to argue with them to get it reconnected if you think they've made a mistake. Do we really want utility companies to have this kind of power, considering how many mistakes they make and don't seem keen to resolve whenever the mistakes are financially in their favour? I speak from experience here. 15 years ago, Empowered insisted I was using £80 a week in electric. I disagreed and only paid them £30 a week. Imagine if they'd been able to disconnect me without going through the courts first. And they're not the only ones. E.ON are way worse. They insisted I was using £20 a week, but despite the fact I was paying them £30 a week, they insisted I was running up a debt. As it turned out, I was using about £5 a week, but I'd paid £30 a week for years. I invite you to guess whether I ever got a penny of those overpayments refunded. And I know I'm not the only one who's had terrible, let's call it service, from utility companies. Imagine if, instead of arguing with them in court, they could bypass the whole process and just switch you off until you stumped up money you didn't owe. I read in one article that they'll be able to switch meters over remotely from credit meters to prepayment meters, and by this method they can add a repayment plan to your account, even if you dispute owing them. Won't that be fun? 9. A smart meter will make us vulnerable to hackers and cyber fraud. When I first read this, I thought, don't be daft. But then, maybe it's not so ridiculous after all. My initial reaction was pretty solipsistic. If somebody remotely disconnects my supply, yeah, I'll probably be irritated and the milk might go off, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal. I might have to rely on charging via battery bank and read by candlelight for a while, but my inability to use appliances for a few hours probably won't lead to the fall of civilization. But then you've got to consider the wider implications. Important places having their supply disrupted. There's many a horrible scenario I can envision. Maybe I read too much dystopian fiction, but some of them are truly horrible. 10. They're not really free. So this isn't a pro or con either way really, because either way we're all going to pay for smart meters if we're attached to the grid. They'll be added to our bills whether we have one or not. So will you be getting a smart meter if you don't already have one? Would I get a smart meter? I don't currently have one and have no plans to change that. But that said, probably at some point following a house move, I'll eventually end up with one, assuming they do become more commonplace. Do I think they'll revolutionise the way I use gas and electric?